And you initially think, what if I run out of ideas? So I think it's that through the podcast and through, to be fair, like networking and things like that as well, I got the opportunity to go on other people's podcasts. And I think a big thing of having a podcast makes a difference to getting invited onto others. How can you more deeply connect with your audience? By sharing your message in one way and then finding the different ways that you can share that message to connect in either a different format, be it video to visual, written, audio, whatever, in a different location. So be it you originally had that video on YouTube, but what about all those people in your audience that aren't on YouTube but really would benefit from that message? So many different reasons, and surely I have to practice what I preach. So then again, whether I wanted to or not, I thought, well, I need to do video, I need to do podcasts, I need to be out there, I need to be doing it, and I need to empathize with my clients too. I actually need to know what it's like to be a podcaster. And
hello, I'm Dustin, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Amy Woods, Content 10X. She is a podcast host, a founder, and a content repurposing expert. Thank you for joining me on the Poly and Content Creator Spotlight.
Thank you for having me on, a fellow content repurposing enthusiast as you are. So I'm sure we've got lots to talk about.
I'm sure we're going to nerd out a lot on it. And it's one of those things where just as a subject, I just get so nerdy about it. And that's why I wanted the show, wanted to talk shop with other creators and, nerds about it.
Me too. I like to geek out about it. You don't want to sit next to me at a dinner party if you start talking about repurposing. I'll just bore everyone.
It's crazy too, because for a while there was hardly anybody talking about it, because there was you and then there was all the founders of all the tools. That was about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I came around because I saw all these new tools. Well, there was all these new tools that came out and I was like, no one's talking about them. I want to know more about them.
You've put loads of great content about the tools though. You try them, you test them, you let us know how they're getting on, don't you? So thank you to you for like putting a lot of tools on the spotlight and like flying the repurposing flag as well.
Thank you. I find that there's a lot of similar tools too. So what I really wanted was like a list of just all of them, because there's a guy named Matt who came up with futuretools.io, and they have a lot of repurposing on there, but it only has around a third, I think, about what's on the market. And then there's Futurepedia, which is another aggregator. Again, only about 25% of what tools are on the market. And so I'm wanting to build a website that actually hosts, like have all the links in one place, so that way you can see them all at once. But I'm trying to work on that. But I was so frustrated that no one was like showing, hey, what's Choppity? What's Too Shorts? What's Opus? What's this one? Yeah, it's just, yeah.
You're going to solve that problem.
Yeah. So the way I like to break the ice, even though I guess we don't really have to per se, because you and I, but I like to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, wow, that no one knows about me. That's really hard. Well, I suppose it's not actually that interesting, but a lot of people don't know in my online audience that I'm half Canadian. Well, I was born in Canada and I have dual citizenship. So I am both Canadian and British, which is a nice little fun thing. But it's not that interesting.
I think it's cool. I didn't know that. I think it's neat. And then you can come over to North America and just like anytime you want to, which is nice. You don't have to worry about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can, and I have done it before. So I have the Canadian social security card and things like that. So I can present myself to the country and work there legally, which is good. So yeah, I don't know. And other than that, I experienced a really horrible like judo accident when I was younger, which resulted in me having a badly dislocated elbow. It was a bit like the final episode in Cobra Kai, where I was kind of in the final and then everything was going well, and then there was a bad move and my arm got kind of like pulled apart a little bit.
Oh, no.
And so I now have a like a kind of unusual elbow joint that was held together with pins for quite some time, and then the pins got removed, and now it's just a slightly strange looking left elbow. So there you go.
Do you still have like full flexibility, or?
Yeah, okay. I do, to be honest. I can do most things at the gym really, but I just anything that I do on the right side of my arm, when I do on the left, it's always weaker. Like it's always going to be weaker. But I've got full movement. But I was lucky because it very well could have been the case that I didn't ever regain like full movement in that arm. So I was super lucky that the surgeons did the job that they did. So yeah, a little thing that I would never have really told anyone about.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And as a fitness person too, it makes me start thinking about what you're doing in the gym. Because I know we talked I don't know if we've talked about it per se, but I know I've seen content of you at the gym or something like that over the years. And I know that you work out a lot too, so you're active. And so I'm glad you have full movement because that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I'm similar to you. I'm a bit of a daily gym goer, like I have to be.
It's good. And that's why I love that question too, because you never know what you're going to get as an answer, and it makes everything else easy afterwards.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of which, what got you started as a content creator?
Well, what got me started? So I guess it all aligned with my business, really. So, but not the first business. So I trying to do a long story short, but I used to be a management consultant. I did that for many years, and then when I decided to break free from the world of management consultancy, I started I guess I did two things. I started a like online business, which was largely building on my business consultancy experience already, where I was providing online like business consultancy support, built a online course, had a little mastermind, things like that. But I immersed myself in the world of online business. So I'm talking about, just following people at the time. The people that were talking about online business was Pat Flynn, Amy Porterfield, Gary Vaynerchuk, Chris Ducker to some extent. There was like a real sort of contingent of people that were all talking about it, and I would just immerse myself in the content of those people. And the big thing that everyone was talking about in that area, that Amy, Pat's, Gary's, etc., was content. So I decided when I was trying to break free and do something for myself, especially because I wanted the freedom of an online business, content seemed absolutely essential. Whether I wanted to create content or not, I embraced the fact that I needed to.
Yeah.
And so I started doing video content, which were kind of really, I felt I was being quite brave because I wasn't the kind of person to ever really jump on video, but I was just trying to do what the experts were saying you should do. And I started creating video content, just trying to share my expertise. And that's when, because of the way that I am, my brain works, kind of the management consultant side of me, probably I wanted processes, I wanted systems, and I wanted to maximize what I was doing. So I immediately was creating videos with a view that, well, if I do a video, then I can transcribe it and then I can, write a blog post. And then I could also turn my blog post into tweets. And then I guess I could turn the long video into short videos. I could create some quote graphics as well and things like that. So I was doing all of that, but it was all content to try and start and grow a business. But my heart wasn't in that original business of the business consulting. That when I was doing all this was when I kind of realized that there was a business opportunity to help people repurpose their content in the same way that I was doing with my own. Because I had a small group of I suppose kind of freelancers that were supporting me. Someone was helping with video edit, graphic design, content writer. And I just thought, there's an ecosystem here that if somebody just went to one company, they could do all this for them. So then I guess I went from just a content creator to having trying, in the early stages of business where we were helping other people create content as well through repurposing it. Then I realized even more how important it was to create content because I needed to practice what I preach. If we're going to work with content creators and spread the word of how important content is for, so many different reasons, and surely I have to practice what I preach. So then again, whether I wanted to or not, I thought, well, I need to do video, I need to do podcasts, I need to be out there, I need to be doing it, and I need to empathize with my clients too. I actually need to know what it's like to be a podcaster and what it's like to, try and grow an audience on LinkedIn, etc. So I suppose it was what inspired me was the growing the business through the importance of content, and then those early stage people, and I guess we're talking 2016ish, 17. All those people I mentioned were the key people that were actually inspiring me. Those guys, Pat Flynn, Gary Vaynerchuk, Amy Porterfield, those guys.
Yeah. There's so many things I could go off of that. First off, Gary Vee was also one of my inspirations too. And it's interesting to think about how we're both systems thinkers, because I was doing something similar a couple years later, essentially. And I remember Gary Vee's talk where he said, you need to make 100 pieces of content a day.
Yeah.
That one, I don't know why that one stuck with me, but it was just like, how do I do it? Like, it wasn't like, oh, everyone who heard that was always like, oh, that's a lot, Gary. I don't know, that's too much. I can't do it. I think both of our brains was like, how do we do it? Like, okay, cool. How?
Yeah.
And he had this like slide deck that he came out with a 60-page slide deck with, here's what I do. But it was very big picture. It didn't really tell you like the details, anything like that. And over the years, he gave a little bit more details. And then I know Doc Williams made a 2.0 version of that slide deck, but both of them weren't really super detailed. And then I remember learning from you, and then learning from McKinney, and learning from other people in the space. But I was like, okay, what's the strategy to go with? And I found myself creating like an ecosystem of content and using tools like Notion or Capacities, which Capacities wasn't out then, but I use it now, to like create a system of keeping track of everything. And one thing you said, Amy, that was really important too, is that you weren't comfortable on camera, and you had to also do a podcasting, and you also are a writer too. You can do all three, especially because of repurposing. Even just doing all three is very important as a creator. And I think a lot of people stop themselves before getting to that trifecta.
Yeah, they do, don't they? I guess you have to do what you're most comfortable with, because you have to look at consistency as a really important factor, don't you? You're a very consistent content creator, and you have to, I guess, lean into what you think you can be consistent with, rather than kind of just jump around with, tried a bit of video, and then I did 5 episodes from a podcast, and then I thought I'd start writing blog posts and things like that. But I guess because I was trying to grow a business as well, I just I leaned into the things that I was a bit uncomfortable with, because I knew that over time, these are things that you will just get more comfortable with and better at. So you have to start from somewhere, and you have to start at zero. And I guess I just saw it like anything else that you might not like as part of a job. When I had my old business, I really didn't like going to these sales meetings every Thursday afternoon, but I had to go because it was part of my job. So I went, I presented, and I didn't like it, but that's part of my job and I'll do it. So I kind of just saw it as it's part of my job. If this is what I'm trying to do, and this is what I'm trying to build, and I was absolutely bought into the power and importance of content, and like you said, the different media of content, then just embrace things that I'm a bit uncomfortable with and give it a go. And even now, compared to most of my friends who aren't in this world and never create anything like video content, I'm obviously a lot more comfortable with grabbing my phone and talking to the camera and things like that, or setting up the cameras in my home office and setting up video content. I'm comfortable with doing that. But I'll still always be a bit nervous and do quite a few takes of things, because I'm not that happy with how it comes out and things like that. But, compared to my friends who would never jump on and talk to a camera in a million years, I guess on that spectrum, I'm really quite far along now, but we're talking years of doing it, 6 years, I guess. Yeah, exactly.
What's really funny is that people would see me as the kind of person who's comfortable on camera, and I would pick it up really quickly. But it was actually the last thing I did. I did blogging for better half of a decade off and on, and then I started podcasting, and then I started doing videos. And it took me forever to get used to hearing my own voice for podcasting, which is a big hurdle we all have to face at some point.
Yeah.
But then even just being on camera too, that was a big hurdle for me, and I don't know why. I think it was just a self-conscious thing. And what you kind of alluded to there is like, once you put in the reps, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. There was this community that I initially joined when I first got interested in content. I can't remember the name, but it was just this community. And they did this 90-day challenge, and it was within a Facebook group. And the challenge was simple. Like, everyone joined it who was interested, and you had to post a video every day for 90 days. It didn't really matter what the video was about, whether you were just updating the group on what you'd been up to that day, or share a little tip, a bit of advice, a funny story, a joke, something like that. But every day for 90 days, come whatever you were doing, you had to put your video in. I honestly think that made a massive difference, and there was no judgment or anything, because everyone was doing the challenge with each other, and everyone would be dead positive when you put your video in as well and say that was great and stuff. And it was amazing in 90 days when you looked at your first 5 or 10 videos to your last 5 or 10. The difference was just incredible through just doing it. Initially so wooden and like unnatural and like a bit stuttering at the end. It was after 90 days of doing it, I just didn't think anything of it, just straight up chatted away and down again. So I would really encourage people, who are looking to maybe start doing something like video content, to find other people who might be willing to do something like that, like join a little private Facebook or whatever platform group and do something like a 90-day challenge. No judgment. We're just going to do something every day for 90 days and get better, because something like that makes the world of difference.
Having that community. Also, a couple things that like we're both doing is like hand gestures and looking at the camera. Those skills only happen after doing those amount of reps, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's like anything, isn't it? It's I don't necessarily, a lot of people don't agree the 10,000 hours. Some people say that's truth, and some don't, but it is putting the reps in, isn't it? And then of course, if you do just find that you can't see yourself improving, or you're just not happy and not comfortable, then you just embrace another medium. Just go for it.
Gary was always talking about too, find the type that you enjoy making. Like if you're scared to be on camera, you don't want to be on camera, then do a podcast or writing. If you feel like a good writer, be a writer. If you really want to be on camera or do live streams, be on camera. One thing that I think is really interesting, Roberto Blake and a few other creators have talked about, I think Gary too at some point, just do 100 reps. Once you get the 100 reps, you've got enough practice. You don't have to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You need those mistakes in order to learn what you're doing right and wrong. And those 100 reps could be for blogging or for podcasting or for videos or live streams too, I guess, is another kind of pseudo fourth one. And it's like, one thing I really find interesting is that people like us, you and me, Amy, we're more 33, 33, 33 because we need to have all of them.
Yeah.
From the beginning, we both knew that like we wanted all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? But then, with the power of repurposing, if we know that if you start at video, video includes audio. So if you plan it right and you prepare it right and things like that, you're going to be able to get audio from video. And if you structure what you're saying and make discrete points and things like that, then you're going to be able to get a blog post out of that as well, and so on and so forth. So I think that's when repurposing comes into its own, isn't it? And that's when the video comes into its own when it comes to repurposing. So I'm sure you get asked this too, but people often say to me, what's the best content for repurposing? And my answer is always that if all things being equal, you would say video, of course, because video has every dimension within it, and you can create visual and written content from it, as well as the audio and video that exists, and do long form video, and you're away. And if you could add the icing on the cake, you could say that live video is the best, because in that experience you're building a community and offering engagement, and then you get the video, then you get the audio, and so on and so forth. But it's all things being equal, isn't it? Because I'm not going to go and say that to somebody who is completely uncomfortable on camera, to the point that actually the quality of the content wouldn't be very good, because they're just not natural and don't come through with their best ideas and the best version of themselves on camera. And then that's not the best quality content, and then all the repurposed content isn't the highest quality either, or that they are so fearful of it, even if they're good at it, that they can't be consistent. So you can't kind of let go of the quality, factor and the consistency factor just to shoot for the best medium. It still has to be the best for you, doesn't it? And if the best for you is to have no cameras on and just talk to your heart's content into a microphone, then, do that, because it'll be the best version of you and the content that you can create, and you can still go on and create more from it. And let's face it, if you can't stand talking into a microphone, and you can't stand being on camera, but you can put the best version of your ideas in written format and create these great cornerstone articles and things like that, then that's the best for you, isn't it? No, like maybe not the best form of repurposing content, but you'll still manage to find a way to repurpose and maximize it. But you'll be consistent with what you're creating as well. So yeah, like, I think video sits at the top of the pyramid, but there has to be a lot of other factors that you don't want to compromise on in order to achieve that.
One thing that's also really interesting too is that people, when they think of repurposing, I think a lot of times it comes from the video idea. Chop it up into clips or make it into a podcast, cut out the audio. But one of my early posts in the newsletter, which this show spun off of, I had this idea that I really wanted to drive home, is that all three parts of that pyramid can go in any way. It's a reversible circle.
Yeah.
So you could make a visualizer for your podcast and make it into a video. You could obviously chop off the audio and put it into transcribe it and make it into a blog post too. So both the video and both video and podcasts can go into blog posts.
Yeah.
What's really funny is that I don't do this series anymore because of just the way I formatted it was not as good. But I had this Poly content series, which is where the name came from for all this. And the idea was, I'm a writer first. I like writing my ideas. I'm going to start off with a blog post. I'll turn that into a video. Then I cut out the audio for the podcast. That was my strategy, which is a little bit unorthodox for some people's sake. But I also knew how to make a video, so I could just take the blog post as like a script, if you will, or bullet points. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's a great way. And actually, when I do my solo podcast episodes and when it's just me talking into the camera, I tend to almost write the blog post first, really, actually, and then make sure that the key points that I wanted to make in that blog post are discussed in the podcast episode. Not necessarily reading it out or word for word, but getting all your ideas down, in that written format first. Yeah, like you said, instead of going from speak to transcribe, like actually write the content first. The other thing I was going to say to you as well is that we're talking here about like breaking down long form content. So we're saying whether it's a video or a blog post, you can kind of break it down into the shorter pieces. But then there's the other way as well, isn't there? That there's the actual culmination of shorter pieces that can be repurposed up into the bigger piece. So, for example, I was talking to somebody the other day who's going to be coming on to my podcast, where somebody in her organization embarked on a year's worth of LinkedIn posts. And it was almost like a series, like Wednesdays with One, I think it was called. And at the end of the year, those LinkedIn posts became an ebook. So they chapters and things like that. So basically bite-sized short content built up over a period of time and became a long form piece of content. The book that I wrote essentially was a few years worth of podcast and blog posts and things like that. Not just literally cut and pasting things together and saying, here's a book, but there was a lot of thoughts, ideas and content there. And it was the culmination of like long form into really long form into a book, so like blog posts. But you can build up and build down, can't you? I think as well, like people will always generally talk about repurposing as it's a breakdown, it's a slice and dice, it's a cut things down. But actually, it can be a short pieces, build them up and create something long and big as well.
I have an example of that too. On my other show that I do, I have a question I ask every guest. What is a polymath to you? Because that's what the show is about, polymathy and stuff like that. And it goes from like a long form. Okay, I have my long interview. There's that one question, chop that up into a clip. And what I want to do is compile maybe every 25 guests into a video. And then do that a few times, right? And then compile the first 100 into a super long cut version.
Yeah, of all the answers of the same question. Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
big to small, small to big.
Yeah, I love that. And often when when I'm speaking to people that we work with, whether I'm advising clients or maybe just somebody's wanting a bit of help with strategy, I often talk about that in terms of the importance of pre-planning and segmenting your content. And that's just the perfect example, isn't it? That in terms of segments, if you have a show like you and I do, and there's always certain repeatable questions that you ask, then just like you said, then culminate all those repeatable questions and you've got a single video of 20 responses to this killer question. Like, I mean, even if they're just short answers, so it's 20-second answers, and you bring 10 of them together, so you've got just shy of like 3 minutes or so. That's then a more interesting YouTube video, most likely. So you've got the shorts, but then the YouTube video is called like, you know, what is content repurposing or something, and the 20 experts give their answer. It's still fairly short form, isn't it? But you've gone from literally snackable 20-second to a 3-minute, slightly more interesting YouTube video. So that's when the pre-planning of your content comes in, because you've planned that and you know that's what you're going to do, and you always ask that killer question. It's so important, isn't it? Rather than looking back and thinking, I wish I'd asked all my guests this one question, because then I could have created a video with the answers to that. It's just brilliant to have that thought process and kind of planning the repurposing before you've even begun, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what's interesting is I have a similar question for this show, and it's, what does content repurposing mean to you?
Yeah, what does it mean to me? So, I mean, to me, sort of as a person, content repurposing means a lot, because it means my, like my livelihood and how I pay my mortgage and things like that, because I have a business based on content repurposing. But what does it mean? So it means, like, it's different ways that you can maximize your content in a strategic and creative way. So to me, content repurposing isn't about just really kind of slicing and dicing things down and just kind of putting a video into a tool and it just bringing out like other videos, or pulling out 50 tweets for you to tweet out about, or things like that. It's a strategic and creative process of taking the content that you already create and then finding other ways to share that message in different ways to communicate and connect with different people. So to me, it's about expanding the connection that you can have with your audience. And I'm acutely aware of the fact that within your audience, you have people who prefer to watch videos, you have people who much prefer to listen, you've got people who are just more readers, people who prefer to interact. So there's all these different learning styles and different ways that our brains work and prefer to take on a message. So if you're repurposing content and you're looking at how you can share your message, at the end of the day, what is content? It's a way of communicating with people and a way of sharing messages. So repurposing to me really is, how can you more deeply connect with your audience by sharing your message in one way, and then finding the different ways that you can share that message to connect in either a different format, be it video to visual, written, audio, whatever, and a different location. So be it you originally had that video on YouTube, but what about all those people in your audience that aren't on YouTube but really would benefit from that message? So get that onto the other places that they hang out as well, reach them and connect with them. And then, ultimately, like, building that community as well through your content, because you're establishing different ways to connect. And I'd also say that there are some people who really prefer to consume longer form content. So they more your existing audience than people who've just found you for the first time. They're going to be more willing to spend time with you and spend 20 minutes listening to your podcast or watching your long video or reading your long blog post. But some people don't even ever have that attention span. Even like your lifetime audience maybe just can't ever really stand listening to a long podcast, but they love just hearing like the short tips, short advice, things like that. So again, it's a long answer, but expanding how you connect with those people too. Like I'm happy that if there's a person who likes to follow my content but would admit I've never actually listened to a full episode, but I absolutely love watching all these short little videos, that's enough for me. That's the way that you like to consume content, and I found a way to connect with you through choosing the right bits of content. So then, like, the last piece of this, so I guess what it means to me is expanding the way that you connect with people through the different places they hang out and the different types of content that they like to consume. But I'd also say that for me as well, there's a really strategic aspect to it too, which is that we were just talking about this, but planning content in advance in order to not just repurpose as an afterthought, but have really thought about what you are going to repurpose for, and then making sure that you're always really aligned with ultimately what your goals are. So if you did a video interview with somebody and your goals are that you really want this particular message to land with your audience, then, you know, you're not just going to cut out any clips from that video for, say, YouTube. You're going to go and cut the clips that align with your ultimate goal and your strategy and what you want to be known for, what you want to be helping people with. So I think it's like the strategic side as well is super, super important. You have to be creative and strategic and never lose sight of your goals as you're trying to expand that way that you reach and connect. And then like finally, I guess what it also represents is efficiency. We talked about this earlier because I think we're both very similar in that regard, but it represents efficiency too. It just represents saving time because you're not constantly coming up with you know, the pressure of new ideas. You're making the most of ideas that you already have. So it represents like overall like a return on investment in a way more efficient way than never repurposing. So that's a very long answer.
I'm used to long answers. It's all good. Especially since my other show is really long-winded. So this show, we go as long as you need to. And I do find it interesting. You brought up how like some podcast hosts go into an interview with a purpose. Like they want to talk about this particular topic with the guest and go for that angle. I've always taken a more natural approach where the conversation forms on its own. Like I have questions. This show is a little bit more formulaic. Like I have generally a similar amount of questions and I might add a couple depending on the guest. Like I have probably the next one I'm going to ask you is unique to you. It's nothing too crazy, but like it's just more about your history. And it's like, oh, the content repurposing person has a lot to say about content repurposing for that question.
Not surprising.
Not surprising. My other show, since it goes into many different aspects of your life, like, okay, your hobby, your career, your different interests, your variety of expertise, there's a lot of different avenues to go down. I can't necessarily know which one's going to be the most, I don't want to say interesting, but the most like descriptive and the one that you have the most words coming out of when I'm talking to you in the show. So the theme kind of happens throughout the interview. This show, I can kind of get an idea of what the theme's going to be like when I have the guests come on, but I try to have that same format where it's like, I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to jump around different questions. I'm going to ask questions based off your answers, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's kind of meta description.
Yeah, well, that's great, isn't it? And that's what the audiences want to hear. That comes from being a good interviewer, really, doesn't it? That, you don't be too formulaic and you spot the opportunities to go deeper on certain things. And that comes with experience as well, doesn't it? I think the more confident and experienced you get in running a show, the more sort of confidence you have to know that you'll go off on tangents, you'll go down different angles, but you know your audience and you know you're doing it because you know that they'll benefit from it and they'll benefit from hearing that side of the discussion. So I think that's really good.
And from what I've experienced, a lot of those tangents end up being golden nuggets anyways.
They always are, aren't they? Yeah. Especially if it's stories, when people kind of share an interesting story, you can't really beat a good old story, can you? So,
Well, and I don't know if this is kind of like the transactional brain in my head, but if I'm having you on the show, right, I'm wanting you to talk to make content. That's like when it comes down to it, like I'm having you on the show so we can have a conversation. Sure, it's a two-way street, but it should be more you than me because it's an interview. And I've been on like 70 interviews, and there was one interview where I went on the show and the host was just talking about herself the whole time. And it was just like 85% of the conversation was her. And I mean, sure, it's her show. I'll let her do what her want. She did make it framed as an interview for me. Whatever. But I've been on other shows where it was like 90-10. And like I felt like I was talking too much, even though it was an interview. Like I want your opinion too. And so, but my point is like I'm having you come on here. If you want to share a long answer, you do you, because I want you to talk. I want you to make content. Like it's kind of like that's the point.
Yeah, I can completely relate with the two examples that you just gave then. I've been in both of those situations before. Especially like you said, the first one where it's like, did you need to invite me on, or should it have just been a solo cast? But also where I've come off and I've thought, wait a minute, like they asked me 10 questions and the questions were like maybe 5 words each. They said 15 words and I said thousands or something. And then you think, did I talk too much? Or but then you think, well, no, because like I just answered the questions, and you do, like 90-10 or 95-10, and that never feels quite right either, does it? So
Again, I might as well just be a solo cast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the question I was referring to, it's a simple one, but what brought forth the Content 10X brand and name?
Oh,
We kind of
there's
talked
not
about it.
there honestly isn't like a big origin story, to be honest. The name. So I guess like I came up with the idea for the business and what we would do, and that it would be about working with other businesses who embrace and create content, that we come in and we're like this superhero that flies in and takes your content off you, creates loads of content from it, and then publishes it for you. And when Content 10X first started, like the first version of our website, on the homepage, there was this really great video that we made where it showed this creator at the desk, and they pressed a button, which was like the Batman bat button thing that Commissioner Gordon is it presses, and it shot up in the air the Content 10X logo into the air. So then the Content 10X superhero flew in, took the podcast, cut the file off the creator, and then like all these fireworks as like all this additional content was created. And then it was like, let us be the repurposing heroes that save the day and help you get more from your content and stuff like that. So when it first started, there was that real kind of like superhero theme to us. And we went through a rebrand quite a few years ago, but we were dead pop arty superhero-y for a while. And it's just like, it's a bit embarrassing sometimes now, the 10X thing, because it's so overused all the time, isn't it? And sometimes people even ask me if we've got something to do with Grant Cardone, which we absolutely don't. But at the time it wasn't as like overused and things like that. So it just literally was supposed to kind of, not in too much of a cryptic way, but just mean we 10x your content, as in give us one thing, we'll turn it into 10 things, but not actually that prescriptive. Obviously, when we meet with you, we'll work out exactly what we need to create and things like that, but we'll 10x your content. So I was just trying to be, roll off the tongue, like, if you work with Content 10X, what do they do? Are they 10X your content? Like, it seemed like a simple thing to say. So yeah, that was the name behind it, not a massive origin story. Just tried to come up with it. It was almost just the first name that I came up with, to be honest, and just went with it. And the brand's gone through a few iterations. We originally worked with a lot of creators and entrepreneurs, and like, I guess, kind of like solopreneurs and that kind of business. But because like over the years we've, like, I suppose you could say we've kind of grown up a little bit and become more mature and a bit more, as you become more established. We went through a rebrand where it's a shame, but we kind of retired the heroes. We had like 3 superheroes with different characters, podcast 10X, video 10X, and blog 10X with their like special outfits and stuff. And we retired them to, it like kind of sounds boring saying it, but to grow up basically. And we were working with mainly B2B companies and a lot of companies in the tech space and things like that. And we just started to realize that we wanted to move our branding a bit closer to their kind of branding too, that kind of industry and things like that. So we still have the fun, playful nature, but not quite as playful as we used to be, I suppose.
I think I remember actually seeing that video back in the day, because when you described it, it seemed familiar. And I also remember the whole superhero theme aspect too.
Yeah, we still have so behind me here, that what you can see, Content 10X Men. That's actually a comic. For the podcast, people can't see this, but that's a comic book, and it's really I'm saying it like being boastful, but it was my designer that did it, so I'm singing his praises really. But it's so good, and that's still something I'm super proud of. It's a comic book, and it tells the story of this person who got like saved by the Content 10X Men. So again, like just playing on the whole thing. Hopefully we won't get sued by the 10, but the X-Men. Again, like, that was a good example of repurposing, actually, because I did a talk at Podcast Movement. We were talking about that earlier. And my talk was kind of based on this. It was like the slides were like a comic book, and I was sharing a story of this fictional character and how he repurposed his podcast and stuff. And we just looked at the slides that we'd spent a lot of time on. We were like, what can we do to repurpose these slides? Because it was great, but like, you know, it was one talk and we need to do more with them. And then we turned it into the comic book. And then when I went on to deliver the same talk at other events, I was able to give the comic book out as a giveaway to people who attended the talk too, which was great because, you know, like a bit more interesting than a fairly boring leaflet. And so yeah, like we still have little elements of it. And that fun video, it is still on our YouTube. You know, we didn't retire it completely.
I don't know why people do, like, just as a certain like sub tangent, I don't know why people delete content. It makes me so bad when people just like delete or even unlist certain things. Like, that's a point of entry to your brand. It may not be aligned with who you are now, but people are going to see the 6 years ago, 10 years ago kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think you know, we were talking about, you know, getting better over time and things like that. And I don't follow the philosophy that you need to be deleting like your older content and things like that. People can see the date on it, can't they? So it's quite obvious that you didn't do it today, and it kind of shows the journey that you've gone on as well, doesn't it? So even though we went through the rebrand that we went through, it wasn't a case of let's just cull everything that has our old branding on or our old logo on, because it's not anything to be ashamed about or anything. It's just the natural course of time, and you change and reinvent somewhat, don't you? So yeah, well, you don't need to erase history, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll be able to see you at some point at PodMove. I'm probably going this year, ideally, but it's one of those things where meeting people at these conferences, that was my first and only conference I've been to thus far. And
did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. I actually got deathly ill from it, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, no. Yeah. It's all that shaking hands and things like that, isn't it? You always get ill after a conference.
Well, I got Legionnaire's disease.
Oh, dear. Really? Was there a lot of people that got Legionnaires?
No, I guess I got it from my Airbnb because the hotel did a thorough search and they didn't see anything.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm good now, but it's just like, it was weird.
So that's the first time you went to it and that's what happened. Gosh.
I don't regret a thing.
Are you planning so Podcast Movement have evolutions in LA, don't they, in March, and then they have the bigger main one? Are you going to try and get to the big summer event?
I am open to any, like, what's funny is that, like, even though I got sick at Podcast Movement, it wasn't because of the conference, it was because of just where I was staying. And so I met a third of the attendees there, I think, because there was 3,000 people. I met around 1,000. I spent the entire time networking. I enjoyed the entire thing. And I think that if I repeat that with other conferences, maybe going to some panels too, but for the most part, going to meet people, it's going to be good. And so I want to go to as many as I possibly can, especially since, you know, I have time to do it. My current role at the job I'm working with should lead me to going to more conferences. So hopefully I'll be able to go to Movement. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And like we were talking earlier, Podfest, which just finished up. It's been a little bit of time since I went to that one, but that's another good event. And there's a big
let's go to it.
Community spirit with that one. Like it just feels like it's there's a real, you know, I don't know, like there's a homeliness and community to it as well, even though it's fairly large these days. It's great to get out there, isn't it? It's great to meet like-minded people and just see the talks, get the content. I think it's mainly about meeting the people, isn't it, really? So yeah, like you should definitely go to some more. Don't be put off by that. That's obviously just an unfortunate thing, isn't it?
It was really funny because I remember going on like the last day, I was trying to go to like the Spotify room, and I walked down this hallway and I saw in the corner of my eye a YouTuber named Trace Dominguez, who is like a host on like SciShow and like Crash Course, I think maybe too, or something like that. Basically education channels. And someone who I watched growing up essentially was talking to somebody there. He was in deep conversation. He wasn't actually even part of the conference. He literally went there just to talk to that person. So I didn't interrupt him at all. But I remember seeing him there, and that was really cool. Then later that day, I saw Shannon Hernandez. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but he's a podcasting YouTuber. So YouTuber around that podcasting niche. And I learned a lot when I first started doing podcasting from his channel. And mind you, I'm starting to feel kind of iffy on Thursday at this point. The last day of the conference, I'm super tired, started getting sick, so I'm not feeling great. I'm kind of like I'm ready to go at that point. I'm on my way out, and I passed Shannon, and I only saw the back of his head for the most part, but I remember like, wait a minute, did a double take, and it was him. I was like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah,
I got to meet him and have a great conversation with him real quick, and it was just like, yeah, memories like that definitely make it way better.
Yeah, I feel like people are just more accessible than you realize, aren't they? Like, like you just said, like you can have chats with people who you've been maybe consuming the content of for some time or been a fan of for some time. And it's funny because I mentioned to you about Pat Flynn, didn't I? I said to you when I was first starting out learning about this world of online business, people that I discovered were the Amy Porterfields, Pat Flynn, Gary, etc. And when I went to Podfest, I mean, I ended up going to breakfast with Pat and a couple of other people, sat next to him, chatting to him about family and friends and stuff like that. And yeah, like it's just funny, like for someone that you listen to a lot of episodes of and this, that, and the other, and you just end up talking, chatting. Yeah. So
I mean, look at us right now. Like you're someone I consume content for a while, and finally was able to get you to come on here because I got this new show. And I say finally because it's just one of those things where I don't think I asked you too often, but it was just one of those things where it's easier than people realize. This is, you got to just talk to them and just, be interested in their life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what we both like to do is create content with people, as this is an example, creating content with. And there's more than just the content, isn't there, that comes from that as well. You get to build relationships as well and things like that. So I guess when we were saying earlier about best types of content, and I was saying about video and the icing on the cake live, you get to have community with people. But actually, if it's video interviews, so if it's video interview, there's all the other non-content aspects too, isn't there? There's relationship building. For some people, it could be door opening, like managing to speak to your ideal clients and things like that would never have said yes to a sales meeting, but are really happy to go and have a podcast interview with you and things like that. So it's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it?
I had a guest on my other show recently who just, I generally in the email follow-up, I'm like, hey, if you know anybody who's good for the show, let me know. 9 times out of 10, most of the guests kind of ignore that. They don't really say much. But the 1 time out of 10 where someone's like, actually, I know 1 or 2 people who will probably be good. I always try to take those recommendations really seriously because a lot of the times it's because the person's just been on the show. It's fresh in their mind. They know what the show is about. So the person they're thinking of is probably actually a good fit for the most part. I'm not super picky, but I am a little bit picky about who I have on my shows. Like I want to make sure they're actually going to provide value and like actually going to be part of the theme of the show. And they don't have to be polymaths, but be multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
If they see themselves as a specialist only, then that's probably not a good match. And on this show, like if you're not a content creator, then you're probably not going to be a good match. But that one conversation with this person led me to have 2 more conversations that I just finished this past couple weeks, and it's just one of those things where it worked out really great, and that's because of that networking effect.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. So there's so much more to it.
So out of the 3 pillar content, you kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. What is your favorite to make? Written, audio, video?
Right. I think that in all honesty, my favorite is probably written, actually, because you said similar as well, didn't you? I do like to just sit down and write. So that's the go-to comfort favorite. But the best for repurposing is video. So I still try and have a video approach to the ways that I like to communicate, but very similar to you. Even if I'm going to do a video, I've written down the key points that I'd want to make and a bit of a structure and stuff like that. So favorite written, I just prefer to just communicate in typing and writing. But like go to best for ultimate repurposing video.
Yeah, makes sense. I find myself just still writing the blog post out, and anytime I have an idea, I have some ideas on my list because I have probably 1,000 or 2,000 ideas just waiting for me to make. It's ridiculous. But a lot of those are actually like blog posts and videos where I have the intention of making them into both because I feel like they deserve to be both. it's not about the strategy or something like that. It's a matter of just, I want them to be both types of content. I might have to make both from scratch, maybe not repurpose it as much, but regardless, I want both. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and you know that you're going to connect. We were talking about the importance of connection, and you know yourself that you're going to connect differently with the written versus spoken and on camera, don't you? And sometimes you do just know that it needs to be both, and maybe slightly different way of like expressing the view because of one versus the other. But you know, don't you, when you need to do it justice, and it needs to come in those different forms and things like that. And I'm just the same as well. And sometimes it just, whatever you choose as a form of content in order to communicate an idea or whatever you're trying to communicate, you know, sometimes you may just choose one medium and it doesn't particularly land. But it doesn't mean that your audience don't want to hear that message. It just means that that particular medium of expressing it probably wasn't right. So don't write the idea off or anything like that. Just try it in a different format. And perhaps that's the way that your audience needs to hear that message.
That's a very, very good point, Amy. And I want people to really listen in on that. So I think that's a lesson that a lot of people have not ingrained.
Yeah, I think because people often say to me, if you've created content already, so I'm sitting on a whole raft of content that I've never really repurposed before. Where should I start? Like, where would I pick the winners to repurpose? And my answer to that is always, on the one hand, you know, data and analytics can give you a quick answer to that. Look at the pieces of content that did really well, that your audience resonated with, and that clearly says, like, if you got that many views and that many you know, kind of, and get, you know, I don't know, listens or whatever the content is, then that topic clearly is great for repurposing. You've already done really well with the video, so go on and repurpose it. But then I always kind of say, but on the other hand, you know, trust your gut in terms of if there is a topic that you knew was absolutely brilliant for your audience and you made some great points and it'd be so helpful, and the analytics, the way that you shared that message, maybe don't show it, but you didn't, it just, something didn't click, then don't always let the data tell you the answer. Give it a go in another format, repurpose that, and just see if your audience couldn't get their head around it written, but when you did the video, like, that's when it clicked. So it's not always the data, is it? The data tells a certain story, but sometimes your gut has to say to you, it's worth repurposing that because it didn't get to shine and it just needs to shine in a different way.
That's very true. And what's really interesting as well is that whenever you're creating the content, when it comes from that, like, comes from your heart, and you might only make it into a blog post, you never know what, like you're saying, if someone sees it as a video, how many more people it's going to reach.
Exactly. The number of times that, you know, I might have shared something, maybe it was something like a LinkedIn post or something, and then you're going against algorithms and this, that, and the other too. But I had so much conviction that it was just, like, you know, really, really good. And then you're like, oh damn, like that didn't do so well, and it really was good, that. And I, you know, me years ago would have got a lot of benefit from that tip or something. But then I'll jump on and do a video on one of the other platforms, or just share the same view but in video 3 or 4 weeks later, and then it does do really well. And it is just a combination of the fact that it needed to be said differently. Yeah, so play around, express yourself. Maybe it needs to be visual as well. You know, some people are such visual people, aren't they, that you might be explaining something a bit complex, and if you did a LinkedIn post that you, like, went to a bit more effort and created a, let's say, like an image carousel where you had some visual representations of what you're talking about as well and brought it to life, bam, people then connect and realize what you're saying. So sometimes maybe it's down to, like, the complexity of the message and how easy it is to take it in as well.
That makes sense. Before the call, we were definitely nerding out a lot about tools. And so this is one of my favorite questions to ask because I just love tools. What tools do you currently use for creation and repurposing?
So I don't know. Let me think. With the podcast, we're using Descript quite a lot. But I already expressed to you that we do have some problems with Descript. So we're actually doing research at the moment into what we might move off from. But you know, it's still it's like good for easy editing. So I use Descript for solo episodes, and the team use it to identify clips that then get passed on to the creative team, who then use Premiere Pro to do like the actual video editing on them and get captions on and things like that. I'll tell you a tool that we quite like. So Submagic, I don't know if you've heard of Submagic. That's good for captions and for short videos and things like that. So we've been playing around with Submagic, particularly for the captions and emojis, and just like a bit more playful, like with the captions that you can do and add sound effects and things like that. And then we sometimes use Veed. Wait, are you familiar with Veed? You're familiar with them all.
Yeah, you tell me a tool,
yeah, you're not going to know at all, are you? Veed, I'm really bad because I'm so fortunate to have a creative team that do a lot of the creative content. But I know that we use Veed, and we use Veed for some video actually, I think we use that for audiograms. So like creating audiograms and designing them, getting captions on when we're dealing with audio only content. We used to use Wave, WAVVE, isn't it? Like that Wave. But we moved on to Veed. And then other tools that we use, I mean, from a business, I know you asked for content creation, but from a business, like a big tool that's that important for us is ClickUp. So ClickUp's what we use to plan all our process flows and communicate with each other, and just, create repeatable processes that we follow for content and repurposing. So massive big fan of ClickUp. I think it's fantastic. Used to use Trello years ago, and Trello was fantastic, but we just kind of grew out of it. But Trello was good. ClickUp's really good. And then I actually said to you earlier that I've almost started reverting back to Zoom for some of the remote interview recordings, as we're doing today, away from like Riverside and Squadcast and those, and back to like I say, the good old days. I know there can be problems with all of them, but I've done a few kind of plan B. Let's go on Zoom. Let's just make sure we've got mics and headphones and get everything set up correctly and things like that. But not necessarily where we're planning on using the whole video, more where we might be planning on taking some clips from it. And then like design, I haven't got anything fancy to say because it's really just the Adobe suite. And also, I still to this day, never downplay how good Canva can be as well.
Right?
And actually it gets better and better, doesn't it? Like, they're great. Like, I would always say Canva is fantastic. Like, it really is.
They made an update to their download button that just drives me batty. It used to be you could just download the image based on your settings, and now you have to, first off, it always for some reason automatically chooses GIF or MP4 and not an actual image type.
I know. Yeah. I thought that was just me. It was doing that for me. So it does it for other people too. Oh.
And then I'm only trying to download the image that I'm working on right now, and I have like 60 templates that I built out. And so it's one of those things where I have to go in, unselect all, then select mine. But usually when I unselect all, it closes that Dropbox. I have to go back and open that up. It's like 10 clicks just to download one image. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Yeah, definitely. So little things like that. What was I? There was one other. Wait a sec. There was a tool we were trying for captions. So,
I mean, speaking of captions, there's captions.io, I think, or something like that. There's Submagic, but not to talk about Opus too much, but Opus also does captions really well, and they're actually probably going to expand that quite a bit here soon, just to kind of give you a heads up, which is nice.
Yeah, we're going to try Opus after, you've mentioned it 100%. We're always trying different tools and just seeing, any trials that we can get hold of, and just have a play around and things like that. And we try to develop a bit of a list of things that we've got our eyes on, where maybe when we did a trial, it was great, but just missed a few features right now. So we'll try and keep an eye on it and see when those features come in and things like that too. So I'm definitely going to try Opus, because we've just been playing around a bit with Submagic, and we like it, but we want to see what else is out there. So yeah, I will try it and report back.
That's good. Feel free to DM me anytime you have any issues too. It's interesting because out of all the tools, Opus is the fastest growing, which is one reason why I kind of like attached myself to it. Like, it's not even necessarily just because I love the tool too, because I love it, because I've made 1,500 clips, like I told you before the call. It's also the fact that they keep adding features. A lot of the other tools that I know of, like we talked about Chopcast and Recast before the call, those tools have been around for a while. They're not as old as Repurpose.io, obviously, but they're some of the oldest ones on the market. And while Recast has changed a little bit and Chopcast a tiny bit, most of the tools on the market have not evolved. Even like Clap, which is a direct competitor to Opus, has barely evolved at all. Whereas like Opus has add features like every week, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think it's some of them when they stay a bit stagnant, like you said, and they just don't seem to be changing much. I always kind of just assume that the founder and the tech team have just moved on to something else, like, and it's just become something that they're just kind of leaving there. And it's good to find the ones where they're just constantly evolving, aren't they, and moving with the times and things like that. To be fair to Descript, they're always adding updates, but it's just that they could just do with fixing things before they add more to it. You know, like it's a bit like the boat has a lot of holes and it is leaking, but they just keep adding more on top. It's like, just fix things first. But there's never a short of an email update of all the newest features and this, that, and the other. But just need to sort out a few other things first, I think.
Yeah, Opus and Descript are probably similar in that boat, ironically. But it's interesting too when it comes to like 11 Labs, for example. We were talking about repurposing like from any kind of angle, any kind of pillar type, blog or video or audio. And I use Beyond Words to make a audio version of my blog post. So if there's anybody who's visually impaired, they can listen to my blog posts. But I could also turn that into a podcast if I wanted to. I'm kind of waiting till I can clone my voice so that way it's my voice and not some AI voice. But it's interesting how like you can listen to any of my blog posts and you can turn that into an audio, which you could use a visualizer, turn into a video. It's interesting how that.
So interesting. Yeah, like the accessibility side, like you said, it's so interesting, and it can only be a matter of time before you speak into the tool and it synthesizes your voice, and then it basically is your voice as well. That's clearly, if they're investing, that's just got to be around the corner, hasn't it? Because Descript already has that overdub feature where it can put your voice in saying something. So yeah, it's kind of exciting stroke a bit scary at the same time.
I know. I only got a couple more questions here, and I know we have a time limit, so I'm going to try to go. I guess we'll have to go kind of fast, but
yeah,
go however you need. Can you share your favorite story that's happened to you as a creator?
I think that, like, for me, it's more just been about the power of content for me and what that has meant. So, like, my story of just going from deciding to launch doing a blog post on content repurposing and then deciding to launch a weekly show about content repurposing, being really nervous that will I even get to 20 episodes, and we're about to do like episode 300 or something like that. I think it's like 300 in a couple of weeks. And you initially think, what if I run out of ideas? So I think it's that through the podcast and through, to be fair, like networking and things like that as well, I got the opportunity to go on other people's podcasts. And I think a big thing of having a podcast makes a difference to getting invited onto others. And then the ricochet effect of that, of ending up being invited to speak at events. And then I think about it and I think, well, because I was a creator, and I put myself out there, people could check me out and things like that. I've had the opportunity to speak at some really fantastic events like Podcast Movement and Podfest and Content Marketing World and Radio Days Europe, and really good events that have come from, I just believe, putting myself out there and being a creator. And I think ultimately, being able to call myself an author, to have published a book, and I had a lot of pride in, when I finally finished that book and got that published and got that out there. And so for me, I think it's just the story of the consistency of getting started and having a point of view has led to so much. Like the podcast has just led to speaking opportunities, and that ultimately led to publishing a book and so on. And it all kind of just comes from like being the creator and standing on the stage. As I always just pinch myself and think that if I hadn't embraced content to begin with, I'd never be stood here talking to hundreds of people about this topic. So sorry, it's not a specific story, but for me, it just represents everything about being able to put myself out there, really, is it, and be recognized as an expert.
It definitely resonates with me too, because I've always, when I think about what ideal career that I would want, content always has some sort of impact on that. Even if I was an astronaut, I would want to have content around being an astronaut. Like, that's, it's just part of me, I feel like. And choosing my path as a content creator as well, like you're saying there, like you said, you gotta have to pinch yourself sometimes. Like, I'm still so ecstatic that I get to talk to you after all these years of like seeing you. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, and that's because of the content. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
it's yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. It's like you get to grow relationships, meet people, opportunities, doors open, and it all can tie back to content. So yeah, it's a lot.
What do you have coming down the line that you're looking forward to?
So I think something that I'm looking forward to is with our podcast and with the repurposing that we do for our podcast. I mentioned to you we're approaching episode 300. I think it's like in a couple of weeks, and so we've been looking at a few different things that we're going to do, and we've always had a very specific process of how we like repurpose the podcast. You know, we create the podcast and then we follow our ClickUp process flow of like how many clips we get, how many images, we write a thread, we create a carousel, all these things that we do. And we change, you know, we would do like multiple times a year reviews and make little tweaks and changes looking at how things are performing on platforms and stuff like that. But what I'm looking forward to is I'm going to change things up for a while and see how it goes, where instead of having such a formulaic approach to the podcast repurposing, I'm going to plan the episodes a lot more, and then create very different repurposing approaches depending on what the episode was and how I planned it in advance. Whether I'm going to go LinkedIn heavy, so I'm interviewing a B2B expert, I'm going to go LinkedIn heavy, we're going to forget XYZ, but actually we're going to do 7 more of those for LinkedIn, or you know, we're going to go way more on the blog post because there's an SEO potential to this topic and things like that. So I'm just looking forward to not being as formulaic with our repurposing and taking each episode as it is and then really going for it from more of a like platform focus of what do I think is going to work on the different platforms. So not the most exciting answer, but quite a different approach that we're going to take to the show. So just look forward to seeing what the results are going to be of that.
I think it's exciting because since your niche is content repurposing, you've surpassed that level of expertise when it comes to repurposing, where the first maybe 50-60% of learning any kind of repurposing as a subject is that kind of more generalist approach where you're like, okay, it's about reaching as far as possible, getting to where people are at. Now that you are obviously way higher up than that, so you're the last 20%, you're realizing, okay, I'm just speaking from what I'm analyzing what you're saying. It seems like you're trying to get that more nuanced approach where you're like, okay, now at this point, I can reach any platform I want. I need to figure out which platforms are most ideal for this particular topic.
Exactly. For this particular topic. And, you know, if this is a really heavy kind of more B2B focused discussion, then let's just really focus on how we can make the most of this for our LinkedIn audience, who are going to be the ones that care the most about this. Whereas there might be other guests that we invite on where we think this is just going to be such a high energy conversation and it's going to be all this tips and things like that. Let's mainly focus on how much we can get out of TikTok, Instagram and shorts and things like that, the shorter clips, this, that and the other. So yeah, like just that more nimble approach, always with the, you know, the overall goals and strategy, what we do.
I love that. Where can people find you online, Amy?
So it's really quite straightforward, because if you go to content10x.com, so content10x.com, that's where you'll find everything about Content 10x. And then me personally, to be honest, these days I hang out most on LinkedIn, I guess. So you won't go far wrong with just putting Amy Woods and probably Content 10x or something in, and there you'll find me on LinkedIn. So that, mainly there. So go to the website, just all the links to all the social content anyway. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, let me know that you listen to this show. That would be great. Put it in your connection request, because I just love to hear where people find out about me. sort of hang out a little bit on some of the other social platforms, but mainly LinkedIn and secondary Instagram.
Yeah,
All at
okay.
Content 10x.
I have those all on the links in the description for you there, so no worries on that. Also, check out her awesome book. Don't forget about that too.
Oh, thank you.
This is Dustin, PolyInnovator, and Amy Woods, Content 10x on the Poly Content Creator Spotlight. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.